My name is Clara Bennett, I'm 34 years old, and I woke up on the Saturday morning of Labor Day weekend in my mother's house to a silence so vast I could hear the dust settling on the furniture, because my entire family had left the state without me. For 2 full weeks, they had all given me the same instruction: keep your calendar clear. They would lower their voices in the kitchen and fall silent the moment I entered. My mother would just smile and say, "Be patient." So I was patient. I stayed in my childhood bedroom because she asked me to. I opened my eyes to an empty driveway and a solitary note on the counter about my grandmother's medication. By midday, I was staring at my sister's Instagram story, a dock, a glittering lake, my family laughing, and a caption that would permanently sear itself into my memory. Best vacation ever, since SHE couldn't make it LOL. I didn't react. I didn't call. I didn't send a text. I simply waited. You see, there was one crucial thing about that lake house that none of them knew. And within 48 hours, my phone would explode with 63 missed calls and a single, desperate message from my mother: "Please come home." We didn't realize. Let me rewind, because you need to understand the person left standing in that empty house. I run a modest bookkeeping firm on the main street of Millbrook, Ohio. I have 3 part-time staff, 41 loyal clients, and a coffee machine that has outlasted every relationship I've ever had. I built this business from the ground up, one tax season at a time, after community college. I live alone in a neat apartment, 10 minutes from the house I grew up in. I write in pencil. Ink, to me, signifies finality, and I've learned that very little in life is truly final. People entrust me with their finances because I am unflappable. I am precise. And I never flinch at a problematic number. Being needed is not the same as being loved. 6 years ago, my father suffered a fatal heart attack in the parking lot of the local hardware store. He was 57 years old, still holding a bag of screws. He was the engine of our family. When an engine seizes, someone has to get under the hood and keep the vehicle running. That someone was me. I became the one who held everything together. My grandmother, Ruth, had her medication schedule managed from my phone. My mother's furnace repairman had my number, not hers. Every family tax return crossed my desk in April, prepared free of charge. And sitting on a shelf in my office, nestled between client files, was a thick, green 3-ring binder. No one in my family had ever seen it. I added to it quietly, methodically, year after year. 6 years of my life were documented within those pages. By the end of this story, every single one of them would know exactly what was inside. And it would cost one of them more than they could possibly afford to lose. But that September morning, it just sat there, patient and full, waiting for the right question to be asked. If you only saw my family from the outside, you'd likely admire them. My mother, Carol, is 61 and can transform a folding table into a magazine-worthy spread. She orchestrates every holiday like a stage director, deciding who sits where, who brings what, and whose news gets announced when. My sister, Brooke, is 37. She works part-time at the bank and is married to Josh, a warehouse manager with an easy laugh. Their daughter, Ava, is 12, all questions and elbows, and the only person at those dinners who ever asked about my week. My brother, Dean, is 29, sells fitness equipment, and has been perpetually one investor away from launching his own gym franchise since he turned 25. Every Sunday, we would gather for pot roast at my mother's house. And every Sunday, there would come a moment when something needed to be handled, a bill, a form, an insurance claim, and the room would utter the same familiar sentence: "Clara will take care of it." Nobody ever asked if Clara wanted to. You don't ask the dishwasher if it feels like working. I fixed Aunt Patty's craft fair accounts. I did Dean's taxes, Brooke's taxes, and Josh's side gig taxes. And last fall, for the first time in my adult life, I said no. Dean wanted me to co-sign a loan for an expensive new truck he couldn't afford. I offered to help him budget for a used one instead. He looked at me as if I had betrayed him. The resulting coldness at Sunday dinners lasted 3 weeks. My mother's version of a deep freeze, where no one is overtly angry, but the gravy is always passed to you last. I thought that frost had thawed by summer. I was profoundly mistaken about what it had actually become. The whispering commenced 2 weeks prior to Labor Day. My mother called me on a Tuesday afternoon. "Don't book anything for the holiday weekend, sweetheart," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Promise me." I asked what was happening. "Just be patient," she said. That Sunday, the entire house seemed to be holding its breath. Brooke and my mother would stop talking in the kitchen when I walked in. Dean was grinning at his plate like a child with a secret. Ava bounced up to me at one point and said, "Aunt Clara, did you know we're—" But Brooke's hand landed on her shoulder and steered her toward the dessert table so fast her ponytail swung.
I told myself it was a surprise for me.
I know how naive that sounds now, but you have to understand the context. I had spent 6 years being the planner for everyone else. No one had planned anything for me since my 28th birthday, when my father grilled burgers in the rain and made everyone sing under the awning. So, when my family began whispering and smiling and telling me to keep my calendar empty, a small, closed-off room in my chest opened a window.
Maybe a party.
Maybe a trip.
Maybe just a cake with my name on it.
I audit other people's lives for a living. I can spot a discrepancy in a budget from across the room. But even a bookkeeper can misread a number when she desperately wants the total to be true. I need to be clear about something, because it becomes critical later.
I did not walk into this situation blind.
I asked for clarity twice. The first time, I asked my mother directly if the family was planning to go to the lake for Labor Day, because if so, I needed to reschedule some client deadlines. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Stay in town, honey. Trust me, you'll want to be here." The second time, a week out, I asked Brooke if I needed to prepare anything. Coolers, groceries, the usual. She said, "Nope, it's all handled. Just keep your weekend free."
So I did what a diligent person does. I moved my quarterly review with my biggest client to the following week.
I gave up my seat at a bookkeepers conference in Columbus that I had been looking forward to since spring. Non-refundable, by the way. I checked the family group chat for updates, because I'm always the logistics person.
Nothing. Quiet as a closed bank account.
And here's the part that hurts to admit. Last January, I had tried to fix this family with a spreadsheet. I printed out a simple cost-sharing plan, who could contribute what to family expenses, everything transparent, and placed it on my mother's table. She cried as if I had read her private diary in front of the congregation. Brooke said I was turning the family into an invoice. Dean called me a cash register with a ponytail. So I folded my single page back into my purse and continued to pay for everything myself, quietly, the way I had for 6 years. They called me a cash register in January. By September, I would discover what they really thought I was. The Friday before Labor Day, my mother invited me for dinner and asked me to sleep over. "Stay in your old room," she said. "Big day tomorrow. Just wait." She made pot roast on a Friday, which should have set off every alarm I own. The house felt warm in a strangely rehearsed way, like a stage set just before the curtain rises.
Dean kept glancing at his phone and smiling.
Brooke and Josh came by for dessert, and twice I walked into a conversation that stopped so abruptly I could feel the period at the end of the sentence.
I caught a glimpse of a suitcase behind the laundry room door.
Navy blue, wheels out, ready.
And my chest did that hopeful, foolish thing again. Luggage. A surprise trip.
Maybe they had finally planned something, and my only job was to show up and be celebrated. I remember standing in that hallway with a dish towel in my hand, deciding that I would let them have the joy of surprising me.
I wouldn't peek, wouldn't guess, wouldn't do the math out loud.
When Brooke's family left, Ava hugged me at the door longer than usual, her face pressed into my ribs. She said, "Bye, Aunt Clara," in a small voice that I misread as tiredness.
It wasn't tiredness.
My mother kissed my forehead at the top of the stairs, the first time in years, and said it one more time, softer than before, "Don't make any plans." I brushed my teeth in the sink I'd used as a teenager and fell asleep in my childhood bed, listening to my family whisper through the wall, warm as a fool in winter.
I slept well. That's the part one still find hardest to forgive myself for.
I woke up at 7:40 to a house devoid of life.
No coffee maker gurgling. No shower running. No Dean stomping down the stairs.
Just the refrigerator humming to itself, as if trying to keep me company. I lay there for a full minute, telling myself they were hiding, that I'd walk down and the lights would flip on and there would be balloons.
I walked down. The kitchen was clean and cold.
The driveway, visible through the window, was empty.
Both cars were gone.
And on the counter, under the good salt shaker, sat a single sheet of paper in my mother's cheerful, rounded handwriting, "Ruth's pills."
Blue one with breakfast. White ones at night. List on the fridge. Trash goes out Tuesday.
Water my tomatoes. They are fussy.
Back Monday evening.
Thanks, sweetie.
No sorry.
No explanation. No mention of a cottage or a destination.
No we'll miss you. Not even my name.
Just sweetie, the word you use for a waitress or a dog. I stood there in my pajamas holding the note, and the room did a slow, quiet tilt as I finally grasped the shape of it.
Don't make any plans wasn't because something was planned for me. It was because I was the plan. I was the house sitter, the pill counter, the tomato water. Staff doesn't get a warning when the family goes on vacation. Staff gets a list.
I called my mother once. It went straight to voicemail, her chipper greeting from a decade ago. I set the phone down next to the note and made myself a cup of coffee in that spotless kitchen, drinking it slowly, standing up, while somewhere north of me, my family was laughing on a highway.
By noon, I found out where they were.
It happened the way most things do now, from a screen.
It was Brooke's Instagram story.
I wasn't even looking for it. The algorithm served it to me like a legal summons. The first frame was a wooden dock over blue water. Dean was mid-cannonball. The second frame showed my mother in her white sun hat, raising a plastic cup of something pink toward the camera, laughing with her whole face, a laugh I hadn't seen since my father was alive. The third frame was Josh at a grill, Ava on a paddleboard. Sunlight everywhere.
I knew that dock. I knew that water.
Lake Arden, our cottage, my father's cottage, 2 hours north. The place I had not been invited to. And across the bottom of the last frame, in that cursive font Brooke uses for happy announcements, sat the caption, "Best trip ever when she's not around LOL."
214 people had watched it by noon.
Aunt Patty had responded with a little red heart. I stood in my mother's kitchen and read it 4 times, the way you read a column of numbers that keeps landing on a total you don't want.
She not around. LOL.
I waited for the scream to build, but it didn't come. What came instead was something else, a stillness, cold and wide, like a lake freezing over in a single night.
I did not comment.
I did not post. I did not text a soul. I put the phone face down, washed my coffee cup, dried it, and set it in the rack. Then I picked up my mother's watering can, filled it, walked to the tomatoes, and stopped with the can in midair. I looked at those fussy little plants for a long moment. I set the can down, still full, on the porch rail. Every machine has an off switch. Mine had just been found. And here's what my family forgot when they left the state. They left me home alone with every device, every calendar, every account in this family that I had ever been asked to manage.
Here is what I did not do that Saturday. I did not call Brooke and demand an explanation.
I did not type the 11 furious paragraphs my thumbs were itching to type.
I did not cry into the pot roast leftovers.
Rage is a payday loan. It feels like money, but it costs you double by Tuesday. I locked my mother's house, drove 10 minutes to my apartment, showered, put on real clothes, and then did the one thing on that note that was worth doing. I picked up my grandmother's pills and drove to Ruth's little brick house on Cedar Street. Because here's who else woke up that morning without a family, an 83-year-old woman with a bad hip and a sharper mind than all of us combined. They'd left her behind, too.
Too much trouble, apparently.
Ruth opened the door in her good cardigan, looked at my face for exactly 1 second, and said, "Well, you'd better come in and crack some eggs." So the 2 people who got scratched off the guest list ate scrambled eggs and toast at her kitchen table, off the plates with the blue windmills, and neither of us said the word cottage for a full hour. There was a kind of peace in it, sitting with the only person in my family who had never once handed me a list. If you've ever been the one holding everything together and somehow the last one anyone thinks to invite, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight.
I read every single one.
And if this story already sounds familiar, go ahead and subscribe. Because what I found on my grandmother's iPad 2 hours later, my family still doesn't know I saw it.
And it changed everything about what happened next.
My grandmother Ruth taught 3rd grade for 31 years, which means she can detect a lie before it's fully formed.
She poured me more coffee and told me what she knew, which was almost nothing. And that was the point.
They'd told her about the trip on Thursday. An adult getaway. "Ruthie, you'd hate the stairs," my mother had said to her. To a woman who still cleans her own gutters against everyone's advice. Ruth stirred her coffee and delivered a line I've reflected on every day since. "They took the boat keys," she said. "Funny. Nobody ever asks who keeps the lights on." I looked up. She looked back, steady as a level.
She didn't know the details. She has never seen my green binder.
But grandmothers do arithmetic in their own currency. She'd watched me show up with a toolbox in February and a checkbook in April for 6 years. She'd drawn her own conclusions and filed them away the way teachers do, waiting for the student to be ready. Then she said something stranger. "Your father did one smart thing about that cottage before he died."
She held her mug with both hands.
"Ask me about it when you're ready."
I said I was ready now. She shook her head.
"No, honey.
You're angry now.
Ready is different. Ready comes after you know what they're actually doing up there. I told her they were swimming and drinking pink things from plastic cups. Ruth looked out her kitchen window toward the north, the direction of the lake, for a long quiet moment, then said the second thing I've never forgotten. Your mother came by Thursday with casseroles and her good church folder on the car seat. Honey, nobody packs paperwork for a swim.
I didn't know what she meant yet, but the iPad was about to tell me.
The iPad was my fault. In the way everything in this family was eventually my job and therefore my fault. 3 years ago, when Ruth's doctor moved her checkups to video calls, the family decided, say it with me, Clara will handle it. So I set up an iPad for her using an old Apple ID of Brooke's because Brooke had an unused account and no one wanted to pay for new storage.
Brooke never logged out.
I maintained the thing every month like a good little IT department. That Saturday afternoon, I picked it up off Ruth's end table to clear her cluttered screen before her Monday appointment. And there it was on the lock screen, patient as a paper cut, a shared calendar notification.
Gary Sutton, Cottage Man, 11 a.m. I stood very still.
Everyone in Millbrook knows Gary Sutton. His face smiles down at you from the biggest realtor billboard on Route 9. A realtor at our cottage on Labor Day Monday at 11 in the morning, with my entire family gathered in one place, coolers packed, kids entertained, grandmother parked, and the one person who reads every document in this family conveniently left 2 hours south watering tomatoes. Numbers don't lie, but they'll sit quietly while you lie to yourself. I'd spent 2 weeks believing the whispers were for a party.
The lock screen fixed that.
My family didn't take a vacation. They took a meeting. And whatever that meeting was about, they had needed me, specifically and surgically, not to be in the room for it. I want to be honest about the next part, because I've replayed the ethics of it at 2 in the morning more than once. I opened the Messages app on that iPad. It was a device I administered, signed into an account its owner had abandoned, syncing conversations.
Nobody had bothered to silence it.
Yes, I opened it with cold hands and Ruth pretending very hard to watch her bird feeder. At the top of the list sat a group chat I had never been in, Cottage Crew, with a little boat emoji, created the 3rd week of May. While I was doing their taxes and amended returns. I scrolled up through 3 months of my family planning a weekend without me the way other people plan weddings.
Who'd bring the kayaks?
Whether Josh's brother could lend a second grill. Mom asking Brooke to pick the week Clara usually does quarterly filings so she won't push to come up. And then, from the 2nd week of June, the message that rearranged something in my chest permanently. Ava, sweet loyal Ava, texting from Brooke's phone, had asked, "Is Aunt Clara coming?
She loves the lake."
And my mother's reply, timestamped 9:41 on a Tuesday morning, sat there in a gray bubble like it was nothing. Not this one, honey.
She'll do the math out loud. That was it.
That was my crime, stated plainly by my own mother in writing. Not that I was cruel or boring or difficult.
That I would do the math out loud in front of everyone. I read it perhaps 10 times.
And somewhere around the 6th, the hurt did a strange thing.
It turned professional.
All right, Mom. I remember thinking with a calm that frightened me. What math were you so afraid I'd do? I kept scrolling, and then I found the spreadsheet. Pinned to the top of Cottage Crew, above the kayak logistics and sunscreen reminders, sat an attachment, Bennett Family Budget version 3. I built that file 2 winters ago at my mother's kitchen table. I made her a clean little template with tabs and formulas so she could track her spending without calling me every Sunday.
She'd hugged me and called me her clever girl.
And now here it was, my own handiwork, reproposed to budget the family weekend I'd been deleted from. The chat spelled out the rest in cheerful little bubbles. Sunday night, after the kids went to bed. Family meeting, everyone on the same page before Gary comes. Monday at 11, Gary Sutton walks the property. The words listing price appeared. Dean in July. Deposit deadline is the Friday after Labor Day. Franchise rep confirmed. 60 grand holds my territory. My mother in August. The cottage does nothing but cost money. Your father would want it working for this family. And then from Mom. The last brick in the wall, posted 10 days before they left. Don't tell Clara till it's done.
You know how she gets.
I sat in my grandmother's recliner with that iPad warm on my knees and understood the whole architecture at once. They weren't just spending a weekend without me. They were voting on selling my father's cottage, the last thing he ever built with his hands.
And I wasn't on the ballot. I was on the chore list. I drove back to my apartment as the light went long and gold. I went to the shelf in my home office and took down the green binder. I set it on my kitchen table and opened it to the first page. For the first time in 6 years, I read it start to finish, as a stranger would.
Property taxes on the Lake Arden cottage, $3,900 a year, 6 years running, paid by me. Homeowners insurance, $1,650 a year, auto pay from my business account. The septic failure, $7,200. The roof after the ice storm, $4,800. The dock, $2,300. The furnace, $3,100. Winterizing, plowing, the plumber, the chimney man, another $10,700. At the bottom of the last page, in my own pencil, sat the total I had never once said out loud, $61,400. The cottage does nothing but cost money, my mother had written.
She was almost right. It cost money. It just never cost her any. So the next morning, I went back to my grandmother. Ruth had coffee waiting. I sat down and said, "I'm ready now." She told me about the smart thing.
8 years ago, 2 years before he died, my father had a warning. Chest pains on a ladder, an ambulance, a stent, and a week of lying in a hospital bed thinking about after. When he came home, he refinanced the cottage to fix the foundation. And on a grey Thursday that October, he drove to the title office and had the deed redone. Joint ownership, his name and mine. Ruth went with him. She remembers he wore his funeral tie because it was the only one ironed. He said the cottage should belong to someone who shows up. Someone who shows up should hold the keys. I'd signed the papers myself at 26, half listening, assuming it was estate housekeeping. He meant to tell the family when the moment was right. 22 months later, he was gone, and there had been no moment. I stood up to leave, and Ruth said, "Sit down. There's a second half." She told me about my mother, the part of her story that never gets told. Carol was 23 when her own mother's health failed. For 7 years, my mother spooned soup, changed sheets, managed pills, and missed the decade where a life gets built. Nobody paid her. Nobody asked her. The one time she raised the subject of help, her mother reportedly stared at her and said she didn't know daughters had started charging. Her mother thought that's what daughters were for, too, Ruth said.
Your mother drowned in this exact water.
And instead of draining it, she taught her own daughter to swim laps in it and called it love. Sunday night, at 9:12 p.m., I wrote an email to the office of Gary Sutton Realty.
It was 3 lines long.
Line 1. I am a joint owner of record of the property at 14 Arden Shore Lane. Line 2. The property is not for sale, and no listing agreement will be signed by me. Line 3. I'd suggest your office verify the title before Monday's 11 a.m. appointment. I hit send, and the whoosh sound was the loudest thing that had happened in my apartment all weekend. Labor Day morning, I picked up Ruth at 8:30, and we went to the farmer's market. At 10:58, I turned my ringer off and set my phone face down. At 11:04, the screen lit up for the first time. I didn't touch it. By midnight, the counter on my missed calls read 63 from 5 different numbers. Tuesday morning, I listened to my voicemails. Dean shouting, "What did you do? You sabotaged me." Brooke in her bank voice, "There's been a misunderstanding." And my mother, 3 voicemails spread across the day. The first, brisk and managerial. The second, quieter, "You paid the septic, Clara. The roof. Why didn't you?" And the third, at 11:58 p.m., barely above a whisper, "Please come home. We didn't know." They came home Tuesday. Dean stormed into my office. "Family money is family money, Clara." I looked at my brother and said, "Then it's strange none of the family paid any." He kicked my wastebasket into the wall on his way out. That evening, Brooke came with a grocery store lasagna and a piece of the truth. "Mom told us in June that you'd turn down the trip," she said. To me, Mom had said, "Don't make any plans." To them, Mom had said, "Clara turned us down." My mother had hidden me from my family. Wednesday, I sent one text to the regular group chat. Wednesday, 7 p.m., Mom's living room. "Everyone, I'll bring the paperwork." That evening, I stood in my mother's living room and opened the green binder. I read the record into evidence. Property taxes, insurance, the septic, the roof, the dock, the furnace. Page after page. I turned to the last sheet and said the number out loud, $61,400. My mother rose off the sofa and said, "I couldn't cover it." She told me about the pension, the refinancing, the credit cards. The bills started coming, and your name was already on things. You made it so easy. Then they made their offer. Brooke leaned forward. "The cottage sells." The first $61,400 comes off the top and goes straight to you. Dean came off the window, 60 for the deposit holds my territory till Friday. And my mother took my hand and said, sign it, sweetheart. You'd be the head of this family. I slid my hand out gently and stood up straight. The cottage is not for sale, I said. Dad put 2 names on that deed, and both of them are staying on it. The invisible payments end on the 30th. From now on, the cottage runs on a written agreement. Everyone's share on paper. Mine included. I turned to Dean. The answer on the 60,000 is no. And then to my mother. I don't want to run this family, Mom. I never did. I wanted to be in it. I'm your daughter. I was never your staff. Dean kicked the coffee table and stormed out. My mother chose silence. Brooke said, I'll call you, in a voice that meant someday, maybe thinner. Ava hugged me and whispered, Great Ruth said you'd stand up. I walked out the front door lighter and poorer than I had ever been. Dean went silent. Brooke texted on holidays. And then, on a grey Tuesday in October, my mother walked into my office holding a plastic grocery bag full of envelopes and said, Teach me the binder. So I did. She took a part-time job at the fabric store. In December, she put a check for $200 on my counter, a raindrop in a quarry. I deposited it anyway. Ava started coming by on Fridays for allowance math. This Labor Day, 1 year later, I woke up at the cottage on Lake Arden. First one up, coffee in my father's old mug, bare feet on the dock. Ruth was on the porch by 8 a.m. Ava practiced her dive off the end of the dock. My mother arrived at noon with potato salad and sat in a lawn chair like a guest. There's a cost-sharing agreement in a drawer in the kitchen with 4 signatures on it. Nobody whispers here anymore. Dean didn't come, but the door isn't locked to him. Late in the afternoon, Ruth watched me flip burgers in the rain-spitting breeze and smiled. If you keep one line from my story, keep this one. Being needed is not the same as being loved. And the day a woman finally learns the difference is the day she stops being furniture in other people's houses and starts being the author of her own. That's my story. 1 note on a counter, 1 green binder, 63 missed calls, and 1 plan I finally made for myself. If this reminded you of a ledger you've been keeping quietly for people who never once asked what it costs you, bring it into the daylight. Let the people who love you prove it with more than a guest list. I was never your staff. I am your daughter. If you know a woman who needs to hear this today, share this video with her. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done at that living room table. Hit subscribe if you haven't yet, and don't forget to like this video for more stories from Zarabell Stories. I'll see you in the next one.